Coming up on today's show.
I recognize that with a poem, the material on paper might be brilliant, but if it's read by someone who doesn't really know, or if they're dishonest in their delivery of it, you're gonna catch on to that, and then you're gonna glom onto that, and then you're gonna
Mm,
wonder why there's this incongruity in the performance. In the last year, I've had what I call a mini epiphany where it's exhausting to contribute a lot of your intellectual energy to creativity. It's
mm,
exhausting to be creative. So I had a cancerous experience in 2017, and I was in the hospital for 43 days and I
wow.
almost died.
I'm so
And
sorry.
that's no, it's fine. The good news is I can tell you about it. The bad news
Yeah.
would have been if I hadn't never
Yeah,
exited
we never met.
ICU. But that's part and parcel why I have a mohawk is because when I started getting chemo, it was a very aggressive chemo, and I was told that I was going to lose all my hair and my eyebrows and all that. So I was like, all right, well, fuck it, I'll just get a mohawk. What's the worst that could happen? But then I never
hmm
lost my hair.
Hi there, I'm April Paige, breaking down the what, when, where, and how creatives get their inspiration. I'm a big fan of the cursey words, and I've been a creative for 30 plus years in marketing and fine art. This is where creatives unite to break down the facts of creative life. Buckle up, let's get lost in the world of creativity together. Welcome, everyone, to Artist Antics with April, where we talk to creatives about creativity. And today I am very excited to sit down to talk to poet and podcaster Falsetto Prophet. Falsetto was born in Houston, Texas. He lived most of his life in Austin and now lives in Raleigh, Durham with his wife, aka Red Devil, and his two cats, OJ and Othello. He graduated cum laude from Sam Houston State University, where he received a BA in psychology with a criminal justice focus. I have questions there. Previous owned a lawn business, worked in customer service, and was a barista at Starbucks. And he transitioned to the insurance industry as a field adjuster in Greater Texas. And he has a health scare and quit his career and created a podcast called Chemo Hawks Sessions and doubled down on his poetic pursuits. And Chemo Hawks is a 3-year-old anthology cast on Spotify where he talks about many things: poetry, reviews, white collar survival, shared experiences, pointers, and amusing confessions. And lastly, I am honored that this is his first time recording on screen. So welcome, Falsetto.
Thank you, April, who also is the name of a month. So I'll always remember. Please tell me that you were born on
I
April
was.
Fool's Day.
I wasn't. I was close though. April 6th.
Was that the impetus for your name?
No, I was supposed to be born in March and I was going to be called April because my mom just liked the name. And she always says, when everyone asks that question, she was 2 weeks late as usual. I was like, thanks, Ma. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, people have called me, they call me every month but mine. And, April wine, April, May, June, July, or, they'll say, hey, September, come here, stuff like that. It's pretty funny. But I would like to start by talking to you about your spark. I ask everyone this question. Like, I know where mine came from as a child, and I have a lot of creatives in my family. I'd love to hear about your love of writing and poetry, where that came from.
I was searching the depths of my depraved soul to find the true inspiration, and I wanted it to be something exotic, but
It
all
doesn't
I
have to. Yeah.
all I can remember is I wrote a poem in I think third or fourth grade, and it was a poem about a color, and I chose the color red because at that
Mm.
time in my youth, red was a favorite color of mine, and it turned out okay. I don't remember if I won a ribbon or anything, but my dad, who he actually passed away at 89 in late July this year. So I just it's that's a weird thing to say aloud, but it's true. But he framed the poem. It was a very short poem, and had it on his desk at his workplace. And I remember thinking, okay, I guess that qualifies as fatherly approval. And so somewhere between then and then college, I started realizing a theme, and the common denominator was my writing, whether it was a research paper or something creative. I got a decent amount of positive feedback or praise from high school teachers or professors in college. And they would say something along, this is very well written, or this is very cohesive. So I coupled that with, I kind of like writing poetry. I'm getting like positive reinforcement. maybe this is one of those rare moments where the thing that I kind of enjoy, I'm also relatively decent at. And so I started writing poems just for my own personal um, motivations and never shared them or anything. I just wrote them. But then I experienced a long gap of writer's block, substantial, like over 10 years. And I got busy with work. And again, the soul sucking nature of a white collar
Yeah.
employer can be devastating, particularly to your artistic creativity or those areas on the fringe of your life that you hopefully don't outgrow.
Right.
Like that big kid inside of you that has this astronomical imagination. But I started writing again actually when we moved to Raleigh and started attending open mic poetry events. That really it lit a fire under my Irish ass to keep writing new poems because I didn't want to be the person that came to say 6 open mic events and continue to read the same material. So I've been writing poems pretty consistently over the last year.
So would you say, and you gave me a lot to go through there. Thank you. Would you say, and I'm asking because, and I'm going to give you my own backstory. Would you say that you have to have a good, and I know this is kind of obvious, but you have to have a good grasp on words, language, grammar, spelling, etc. And I was raised in a two language household where we spoke Spanish mostly, and my broken Spanish and English were horrific because I was merging them together as I was learning, and it was just a mess. And so, I guess I'd love to ask that question because I think, in my mind, the way I see poetry is that you're painting with words, and those are your colors, those are your brushstrokes, those are your perspectives, or uh, uh, the way that you put it together has meaning. So just curious your thoughts there. Anything?
I would provide the analogy of a skateboarder where the more confident you are with the mechanics of writing, just like the
Mm-hmm.
more confident you are with your center of gravity or your footwork, you're probably going to be more inclined to take bigger risks,
Mm,
whether it's an ollie that's off of a 3-story building or something, or whether you are writing something and then presenting it to a room of 75 strangers on a microphone. I think the more confident you feel in the basics, it's going to enable you to take bigger risks. And it's no small coincidence that I actually went to a poetry reading to support Erin. She went to read some
hmm.
poems from her new chapbook, and the performer that went after her said something rather profound before she gave her 15-minute reading and said, as a poet, specifically poet, not just writer, but as a poet, she said the moment you start writing safer or taking fewer risks, you've lost it. You've lost that
Oof,
edge or that magic. And I thought that was very true.
it
And
is.
so I think it was maybe getting some of the positive feedback. I started feeling more comfortable in my own writing. And then that convinced me, hey, maybe it's good enough to share with the world at large. And then
Mhm.
at some point you start developing, I dare say ego, but I think if you're going to be really good at something, you have to think you're maybe invincible because if you don't, you're going to cave to the naysayers, or
Yeah.
the dissenters or what have you. So,
Well, you have to have a clear voice, like,
right.
and it's the same thing with art. I can't take risks in my paintings. My paintings, I'm working on a new style. So to your point, like you have to have, it's that razor's edge of having to have the technique and the actual, colors and composition and all of that behind you so that that edge meets where you let go and where you have technique. That's the edge. And finding that and writing it is almost like a surfer. It doesn't happen every day. And I think to your point, such a great point, is that you have to keep pushing yourself, just like I'm doing now, to find a new style. Like I'm trying to mash these two other artists that I love and weave myself in there somewhere. And it's really important to me that it has more energy on my pieces because I feel like now I've outgrown what I've already done. Not that they're bad, just that now I'm in a different space and in a different mindset, and I want to have more energy on that piece. And to do that, I've got to take a lot of risks, and I've got to do a lot of things that I wouldn't normally do just to try them out first. And then when I feel like it's me and I feel like, oh, I've got it, that's when I feel comfortable sharing. But I don't like to share my experiments, so to speak.
Well, and it's a bittersweet exploration because if you reveal something too soon, and say that it's not received the way you would want it to be,
Yeah.
when you know it wasn't ready, no one's ever going to believe you that, you just gave us a sample. Okay. Well, we'll sit back and wait for the finished product. The assumption when you present something is like, this is my best version of it, you know?
Mm.
And so I'm the same way. Like, I don't want to read. I know people that will perform at open mics, and that's been a learning experience in and of itself with the people watching and just seeing how people present their work. And, and like, so today I'm on this video, whereas for my podcast, 100% of it has been only the sense of audio. I recognize that with a poem, the material on paper might be brilliant, but if it's read by someone who doesn't really know, or if they're dishonest in their delivery of it, you're gonna catch on to that, and then you're gonna glom onto that, and then you're gonna
Mm.
wonder why there's this incongruity in the performance. So I think it's best when someone who understands their work truly is the one to present it. But I like to read poems, or I like to present poems when I know that it's so far the best that I have. But I know people that have gone up on these open mics and they have read a poem aloud that they just wrote while listening to other poets that night. And I simply do not have the wherewithal to subject myself to that, because I would rather perform something that I've read through a few times.
Yeah, it needs to be curated for sure. Like,
Right.
I think that is important too. I mean, not the perfectionism, which we were talking about earlier before we started, but I, I think it's important to make it, something as good or as great as you had envisioned so that you can tighten it up, and make it really punch and hit home. And that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to do with my stuff too, in a different kind of way, but visually. And, it's interesting to me. So what do you think about the poetry scene here?
I admit to being something of a neophyte in the poetry realm here in Raleigh. I mean, I have attended something of a cornucopia of open mic events, and I have gone to some of them pretty religiously. But I have gleaned from some of the people that host these various open mic events that a lot of the venues in Raleigh are hard on poets. They don't necessarily open their doors to an open mic event, even if there's also,
Mhm.
say, musicians or even ventriloquists or comedians, what have you. But I've been told that a lot of places are just kind of reluctant to provide a safe haven monthly for like a gathering of poets. And I don't know if it's because they don't want the liability of all the emotion that's going to be flying around. I don't know. But I often wonder if poetry is a dying art, because, you
I was
know,
just gonna say that. Yeah.
most of my friends, they don't even read, and they sure as shit don't write poetry or read it. And
Yeah.
so I have found that there are a lot of poets that their work might even be outstanding, but I don't necessarily relate to them.
Mm.
They really, a lot of people will write poetry that might be beautiful and it might be cathartic, but it's very unproductive. Like they'll vent something and it's fire and brimstone and it's ghastly and it's grotesque, but when you get through the poem as a audience member or a listener, you really just kind of feel broken and devastated. And so I'm thinking, well, you can start with that and maybe end on a note where there's some modicum of hope or something. And I think that's the difference between like spilling out your thoughts in a journal or diary and then just reading your very raw thoughts aloud, and then
Mhm.
maybe thinking it through and having maybe like a beginning, middle, and end. So I guess it would be fair to say that maybe I'm like a storyteller poet, but I don't have the I don't have the stamina to write a novel. But some of
Right.
my poems can be lengthy. But
Right.
I'm starting to recognize the difference between good poetry, and the poetry that's good can also be very honest. But I'm
Mm.
starting to recognize the difference between that and the poetry that just really has that mic drop ending, and they just walk away from the stage and you feel shivers or you feel chills, or you're going to
Yeah.
remember that poem for at least a week. And they're rare. And I think talking with Aaron and some other poetry friends, I think I've come to the conclusion that it's not easy. Anyone can write and anyone can vent, but it's not easy to write in 100 words or less something that's timeless, something that is generationally appropriate, and something that is universal and that packs an emotional punch and it's not too
Yeah.
maudlin. It's hard to do that. And
Yeah.
I would love to say that 90% of my poems fit that metric, but they don't. But some of my poems I'm particularly proud of, and I think they deliver on just what I wanted them to. But
Yep.
very good poetry, I think, is rare, and
Yeah.
I guess it's
Yeah.
supposed to be that way.
And it's a shame too because, I know it's not, in fashion or, the cool thing to do to, read poetry or listen to poetry. I think that's part of it, probably why the bars and restaurants or whoever is hosting them or not hosting them, I should say, is not doing that because it doesn't draw as big as a crowd as a band, that's playing rock and roll or whatever. But yeah, I think that we need to keep it alive because as humans, we're the only ones who can translate and um, teach and learn or give thought provoking, topics through what you're writing. And I think that it's important for all of us, just, all the arts really, it's really astonishing to me now that kids can't read, they can't write cursive, they don't know how to, you know, tell time on a regular clock. I don't know
Oh
what's
yeah.
happening anymore. I'm just like, what is going on right now? Yeah.
Traditional wristwatch. There's an
Yeah.
hour, minute, and second hands. Some things have to be kept alive, like you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. I just, and poetry is one of them. I mean, two of my favorite poets, Maya Angelou, Rumi, I know they're famous and popular, but a lot of what they say and what they write about really hits home for me. And I'm curious, like, are there general topics that you write about in your poetry? Like, do you stick to certain types of things?
Oh, sure. I did want to tell you that if it gives you any comforts, I was just quoting a Maya Angelou quote the other day where I was talking about how you'll never forget how someone made you feel.
That's right.
And I think that's so timeless and that's so memorable and it's so poignant. So it's tough because I'm going to answer your question, but I wanted to preface it with the idea that there are a shit ton of schools of thought out there about how to be a poet and how to write as a poet. And I don't know that I agree with some of them. So for example, I've heard recently from people they're more academically accomplished than I am. They have master's degrees, perhaps PhDs in creative writing. And they have said that if you really want to write something true and good, you can't go into it really with a plan. You have to just write, and then whatever spills out on the page, that's the truest form of art. And I don't write that way. In fact, I start with a title and then I
Mm,
write a poem all around the
mm.
title. And that's very unusual from what I've gathered because most people they'll write this beautiful, extravagant, very upper echelon work and present it and they're like it's untitled. And I'm like, how do you not have a title? When in doubt, pick your sexiest line from the poem
Right,
and then just
right,
put that in there.
right,
But
right,
so I guess my process is unusual, but I like to go into it with a lot of forethought. I'm like, I have this idea. I want to tell it in a way that people will have to listen to. Because so the thing is like you want to preach something, but if you can do it artistically enough in a poem
right,
and it slips in there under the guise of art, you
right,
could still get your message out and not be looked at as someone who's on their soapbox. So that's
right.
sometimes the goal. But just to give you a sample, so when I was working at Starbucks as a barista, this was back when we had cash and coins. Remember when we had like currency that had heft to it? It didn't start with the word crypto or whatever.
Yeah.
But the guy he paid the tab, and then I looked in my hand and I was like, "Do you want your change?" And I think I had a quarter, a dime, and maybe 3 pennies. He goes, "Well, give me everything but the pennies." And then he left, and I said, "What the fuck did pennies ever do to you?" And
Right,
so I said, I need to write a poem about pennies. So I wrote a 4 stanza poem about how maligned and how marginalized pennies are. So I
right,
wrote this poem like called it was called Lament for a Penny, and then I changed it to Penny Foolish. And it's just all about like we need to think about what it's like to be a penny and how they have a terrible life and how they're never going to amount to the skill set or the acclaim that dimes and nickels and quarters and more worthy of forms of currency. So that was one. But more recently, as I've gotten older, I tend to write about things that I consider to be important for humanity, for posterity. So I wrote a poem about it was about deer. So I was wondering how many people are killed by deer, like where a deer runs into the car and then the car
yeah,
is totaled and the person is killed. Because I've met so many people that they had that traditional muscle car from the late 60s that they loved, and then a deer took it out. And so
right,
I typed in like how many deer actually kill people in cars like in America. And then so that starts with the first like the I guess it would be like the epigram is like 440 people are killed by deers every year. And
yeah,
then I wrote a poem from the deer's perspective of like, well, this is why we're doing this, because you've encroached on our land, you've given us no choice. So I guess you could say it's like an environmental poem. It's kind of a poem where you're giving the animal the anthropomorphism or personification, where you're giving the animal like agency over man.
mm, Hmm.
And then I wrote one about how it's probably the one I felt the most passionate about was it's essentially talking about how everyone would rather look through a telescope at distant galaxies or stars, or they would look up ancient history from 1,000 years ago and spend their life learning about that, or maybe examining an artifact on the ocean bottom floor, when all they have to do to really unlock the mysteries of the universe is walk to a neighbor that they've never spoken to in 10 years maybe and just start having a conversation with them. Like I really believe that we're going to unlock all the things we seek to learn by talking with strangers and getting to know their life story
Yeah.
instead of looking through a telescope or a microscope. So I felt very passionately about that one. So it just kind of depends. These things strike me at random times. Sometimes it'll be for a prompt, like we all challenge ourselves as a group to write Halloween poems for this last Halloween, and so that was kind of a prompt. But I prefer to write about something that just strikes me randomly. I'll jot
Mm,
down my cornucopia or plethora of thoughts, and I'll try to wrangle them into something coherent. And that's the most time consuming part is taking my thoughts that could fill a short story and condensing them to a 1 page or 2 page poem.
right. Yeah, no, that's great. So many good things there. So you go where you're moved. I do too. Like, I get inspiration from everywhere, from having a conversation, like you're saying, from seeing something in nature, from, seeing something in a film or, whatever it is, or a magazine even. But I'm curious to hear like what your structure is. Do you do free verse, traditional, experimental? I mean, I'm pretty sure it's not haiku, but those are the ones I know.
I have written about 3 haikus,
Have you?
and I don't know how I feel about haikus. I mean, I think whenever people hear the term poetry, they immediately assume, oh, haiku. Like everyone
Right,
knows haiku.
right.
I think in a way, haiku is very deceptive because you're like, oh, I only have to write, like 20 words.
Mm,
That's brilliant. But then you are like, wait a second. I have to write about something that is, infinitely profound in 20 words,
mm.
and it has to follow something of a structure. So I don't write a lot of haikus. I used to, and this is actually going to tie into, for example, you were talking about with your own artistic pursuits. You said that you like to challenge yourself. And so like maybe once you get the hang of something or you master that initial skill set of, say watercolor or pastel or whatever,
Yep.
you're currently engaging in a new pursuit, right? Like you're learning a new form of painting. Is painting your forte?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, I like photography too, but really, since I was a child and could hold a crayon, that's where I've always, been. And my family, I took a vow of silence till I was about 8 years old, and I would sit in my room and create. And I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to play with anyone. My family thought something was seriously wrong with me. They would literally push me out the door and be like, "Go play with the kids." And I'm like, I would cry. I'd be like, "I don't want to. I don't like them. They don't like me." Why can't I go? I was happy. What's going on? Why do I have to do this? So yeah, I just was always immersed in my own creativity. Like I get lost in it, and I still do that to this day. Like I hunt for that moment because I'm sure you can relate with this. I sit down to paint. Sometimes nothing is happening and I'm getting frustrated and I'm just like, okay, maybe not now. And sometimes I push through that and something will happen, but usually when I hit that roadblock, I know, okay, something's not right. I can't do this right now. And then when I do hit it is when I, want to stay there and I don't want to, I'll look up and it's 2 in the morning and I'm like, oh shit, I got to go to work tomorrow. So I love, representing something that is so deeply meaningful to me on visually. And whether somebody likes it or not is a bonus.
So
So that's
that's interesting because well, okay, so I do completely relate to you have to keep it going even if it's expanding beyond the constraints of what is like the time you allowed for it, or maybe you have an engagement you have to get to.
yep.
That poetic or that artistic life force or pneuma, you have to engage it when it's present because you may
Yeah,
lose it and you don't know when you'll get it back. So
that's right.
but
I
are
call
you
it
all?
being in the zone, just like
Oh, sure.
athletes. You're in the zone and when you're there, it's like a meditation, like literally nothing else exists in my mind at that time. And it's hard to get there because, once you're into it, then I think over a small amount of time anyway, if I'm on the right track, then it just compounds upon itself. And then like that's when I'm really in the zone. That's how it happens for me. I don't know that it's that way for everybody, but that's the way I do it.
I didn't think of it much prior, but in the last year, I've had what I call a mini epiphany where it's exhausting to contribute a lot of your intellectual energy to creativity. It's
Mm,
exhausting to be creative. And I didn't think about that before, but it is, and rightfully so. And so this zone that you speak of, I think it has to be that way because if you're
mm,
going to crank out something that you know is your best work or worthy of your own, time investment, I think it's got to be something that drains you because you're shutting out everything else to make this thing grow and to, coddle it and to allow it to develop into something, truly timeless or immortal or what have you. And I don't think that's
yep.
something you can do when you're multitasking. Because
No.
if it was that easy, then, I mean, Michael Jordan, when he's zoning in on the backboard of the goalpost, his tongue was out. He was fully immersed in the moment,
Yeah.
and there could have been an assassin,
Mm,
three seats down, and he would not have noticed because you can't just dabble in it. You have to invest, and that's the trade-off is you invest. And that's why I also understand why, for a little Phantom of the Opera reference, when Claude Rains strangles Pleyel for stealing his music, if I was 10 years old, I'd be like, wow, this guy's a homicidal maniac. I don't understand it. But now your life work, if someone stole that from you, it took the credit for it, and now they're up on the stage getting all the glamour and the flowers and the spotlight.
yeah.
I can see why that could drive someone insane because you've
Yeah.
invested so much of your life and energy into that, you
Well,
know,
it's stealing. It's stealing.
yes,
Flat out stealing. Yeah,
and
it's
it's
flat
and
out
it's so
fraud.
personal. And I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm sure there's some of your paintings, maybe all of your paintings, that are very personal to you.
Yep.
So okay, but so haiku. So I have written a handful of haikus. Here's one. I have this little haiku I wrote maybe 7 years ago. It's called "Soul to Shed," and it is the cicada choir sings a cappella until their souls leave their shells. And the inspiration of that was simply when I was growing up in Texas, we had cicada shells everywhere on trees, like their husks. And I
Hmm.
remember the sound and I remember the shells. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I'm satisfied with that. It meets the parameters of a haiku. Is it my best work? No. But I just did it to show like I am capable of writing a haiku.
Right.
That's not the stuff that really excites me and makes me want to sit down and spend 3 days constructing what I consider to be a poem worthy of my time. But I did start off very traditionally. So I was a very traditional poet. I was someone who felt that if you're going to write a poem, it has to fall under the scripture of it has to have a rhyme scheme. It has to be limited to syllable count. It has to have a very structured stanza. And that's because the poems that I was introduced to when I was young were very like classical or like Shakespearean-esque poems. And so that's what I started with. And so for me, actually breaching out of my comfort zone in the last 3 years was I've started writing a lot of free verse. I've been
Mm,
writing poems that are not nearly as confined to the rules and structure of traditional poems, and they're much more easygoing and more flowy, but not so rigid. But I have found that there's one underlying characterization to my work that I have yet to let go of, and I think it's because I just treasure it so much, maybe, is the rhyme. Instead of having a traditional metered rhyme now, I still have rhyme, but it's more employed through like internal rhymes. And so there's just something about rhyming. But all these kids today, if poetry is dying, then the traditional poem, like the very structured poem, that's definitely dying. Because once free verse took over, I don't think
right.
people really look back.
Well, it's like music and song too. I mean, to me, they're, very close cousins.
Right. And that's why I
Yeah.
think it's such a incongruity when you have these kids today that are like, "Oh, I'm not a poet. I wouldn't dare take the title of poet," but they're lovers of music, whether it's
Mm,
Taylor Swift, Eminem, the Spill Canvas. These are
yep.
21 Pilots. My good friend Michelle, she's a rabid 21 Pilots fan, and all these people that are singing along with the words.
Yeah.
You are singing poetry. Like these are poems. And so the joke I have is I can't play an instrument like Joe. I'm never going to be part of a band, but I could write the songs perhaps. But
Right.
I can't sing and I can't play an instrument, but I could be, like kind of the ghostwriter of the music.
Yeah, no, I've had a lot of songwriters on here too talking about rhyming and, now with all the technology, they have all the tools they need at their fingertips to, be able to, like, really have a thought, not sure where to go with the rhyme, and then come, find all these words that rhyme with it, and then that's what the precipice of, creating the next line or whatever. But
Sure.
so my last poetry question, then I want to get into your podcast. Do you set a certain amount of time? Like, do you do it, every day? And also sub question to that, like, um, what's your process? Like, do you start from, I know you talked about inspiration, but do you have that inspiration, do an initial brain dump, then go back and look at it, and then look at it again and again and again? And, what does that look like?
I generally commence with a title. There's a title I have in mind, and I'm like, okay, here's the title. So essentially, here's the outfit, and then how am I going to fill the outfit?
You back
And
into it. Yeah. I've had songwriters talk about that too, where, and I've had a few comedians on here, and they said, I have a bowl of punchlines, random punchlines, and they pull it out of the bowl and they read it and they have to back into that joke. So
sure,
yeah,
sure, that and
similar.
that and,
Yeah.
and that fits. And I think a lot of comedians, from what I've gleaned, they have a very carefully fine-tuned selection of jokes in their back pocket that they can pull from when they
Mm,
need to,
yeah.
in the event that they have like a harsh critical crowd or
Right.
something. But
Yeah.
I
Hecklers.
start exactly.
Yeah.
By the way, I will have people know that at these open mic poetry events, there's nary a heckler. I don't think we've experienced a heckler yet, but I'm sure they're out there. Um,
Yeah.
I start with a title, and then I will write the bones of it. I'll write a skeleton, and just to kind of give myself like a blueprint maybe for the poem. And there are components there that I think are rich and they are magical, but they don't quite come together the way they need to come together for the poem itself to be seamless. So I
Mm,
start with this kind of skeletal outline. I put it on the paper. That doesn't take long at all. Like I'll jot down thoughts in a matter of 8 minutes. But
mm.
what takes long for me is, so let's say I did that on Monday to start with the beginning of the week. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, for anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, I'm going to be revisiting the words and both the structure and the order of operation, like how are these words coming together. I always want to have a mic drop ending, so I always want to wrap up the poem like you would a story, but I also want the last words to be some of the most impactful of the entire work. And
Mm.
I also want to have some message in the work that I believe at least will connect with the audience or the listener, even if it's not the part that I intended it to. So, or for the same reason. So, for example, I've written poems where there's an emotional climax, but as I wrote it, I had a very specific in mind for why it should impact them emotionally. And I have had a few people share, which is very brave too, to go up to a stranger and relay how your poem that was very personal and
Oh,
emotional,
yeah.
how
No,
it
it's
connected
so
with
vulnerable.
them.
Yeah, it's so vulnerable.
But they have sometimes said, "Oh, that part really connected with me," and I'm like, "Really? Did it?" And they're like, "Because," and then they'll throw me a curveball of
Yep.
something like because of. And I'm like, "Oh, interesting." So and that's where I believe someone. I'm sure a lot of people have said this, but it has been said that when you write something or you create an art and you subject it to the world, yes, you are always the person who created it, but it takes on a life of its own. And
That's
you have
right.
to just kind of let it morph into what it's going to morph into and mean what it's going to mean to the various recipients of it.
That's right.
But I generally know when my poem is mostly complete, but every once in a while I'll revisit it like a month or two later and I'm like, I can make that better. And I couldn't have made it any better 2 months ago, but I can make
Yeah.
it better now. And
Yeah.
and I don't know if you're an avid film watcher, but David Fincher, who's one of my favorite directors, he's made a lot of controversial films, and he really pushes the edge. But he has been noted as saying that he'll put everything he can into, say, Fight Club, and he's
Mm.
totally in the zone, as you said, and he makes it as good as he possibly can. But then 6 months later, when he's revisiting the work after it's come out, he's full of lament and regrets, and he's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I could have done," but you can't
Right.
think of it in perpetuity in one finite moment. So you
Yeah.
have to just accept that that was the best you could do at
Yeah,
that
no, I
time.
have very similar experiences with my art. Like, people see paintings and they'll come up to me and start talking to me about what they see, and I'm like, "Really?" like literally nothing of what I was doing. And I was just like, wow, that's great. I'm glad. Like it brings up, some emotion for them, a memory or, family or whatever it was.
Right.
And it was nothing of what I was trying to do. And I just think it's fascinating. I love that. And it's so true. It has a life of its own, and it has a meaning of its own, because it could mean something very deep for someone that you just happen to pick that animal or that landscape or that, musician that you painted. And it had such a, specific memory for them. But also, to your point, I have to sit with them I put them all in my living room, which, whatever. I have a million paintings in my living room
That's
against
I
the wall.
I
And
applaud that because I've known people that are photographers
yeah,
and painters and sculptors, and they don't surround themselves with their own work.
yeah,
And I'm thinking to myself, you absolutely should. You should be proud of it. You should learn from it. I mean, it's something that
yeah,
came from you. So
yeah.
just for an aside, I wrote this poem years ago. It was actually, are you a poet yourself?
No.
Okay, but
Not with
but
my language problem in particular. And then I took a technical writing class back in the day, and it really screwed me up. But go ahead.
no, it's okay. I spent 14 hours in college trying to learn Spanish, for example, and I failed miserably.
Yeah.
I think I started trying to learn a foreign language too late in life.
Mhm.
It's easier when you're 5 than when you're like 25. But so I wrote this poem, which is an acrostic, which is it's a poem that you write to honor some form of art. So, for
Mm.
example, I know they do this thing in downtown Raleigh where it's some art gallery, and I actually submitted to the contest and I did not advance, but they will try to pair a poet with a painter or artist, and they will
Mm.
then do a reveal at the art gallery where near the piece of art, which is usually paintings, they'll then have the poem that won, and they'll put it up next to the piece of art. So they kind of
Oh,
complement each other.
awesome.
But
Is
so I
that
did
still
write.
going on? Because I'd
I
love to
think
be a part of that.
I think it's an annual event. If you just
Okay.
type, I can't remember the name of the event, but I think it's annual. I know that one of the names I think attached to it might be Anna Weaver. She's very
Okay.
involved in the poetry community. But like
Okay.
once a year at some art gallery in downtown Raleigh, they do a contest where, so I submitted like 3 of my poems, and the judges review the poems to try to determine
Match it.
who's right,
Yeah.
exactly. And then I think they
Yeah.
have 20, and you win some money. I think you get like a couple $100 or something, and you get to read at the art gallery with their grand opening
Okay.
your piece of art and or your poem. But
Awesome.
I wrote one poem for a painting called Nighthawks by Edward Hopper. It's one of my favorite paintings. It's the one from like the 50s or whatever, where you've got these
Mhm.
guys in fedora hats, and it's through a diner in the middle of the night. So I
Mhm.
wrote a poem about that, and then I ended up putting one line of my poem, having it engraved on this glass, which is, and when their hearts renounce all hope, they raise their spirits, sip, and cope. So
Uh-huh.
it's just one line from the poem, but like, and I don't know if it's like this with your paintings, but starting out, I wanted the whole poem to be a mic drop. I wanted people to be so flummoxed and so overwhelmed by
Right.
the powerful nature of the entire poem that they
Yeah.
faint. But
Yeah.
I've come to accept that if someone isolates on one line or one stanza of your
Yep.
poem, so with your paintings, maybe just the lighthouse. They're
Yes.
like, this lighthouse speaks to me. This is the most gorgeous, fundamentally flawless lighthouse I've ever seen. And you're like, yes, but it's just one lighthouse in the sea that I've painted. But they're
Right.
like, but no, the lighthouse. It all comes to the lighthouse. It has a ubiquitous gaze. But
Yeah.
you have to accept that maybe that's enough. Like maybe there was just a part of your piece or poem that spoke to them, and
It's
you
just
accept that.
Yeah, it's just like people. Like you don't get to decide what people think of you. It's really none of your business in my humble opinion. Like,
Right.
what people think of you is going to be what it is. And you just have to be yourself and, do your best. And that's all you can do. If
Right.
people misunderstand or misinterpret, or whether it's good or bad, it's just you can't control it basically. But when I let them sit in my living room, I have to sit with them for a few weeks just to make sure exactly what you're saying, that I there's nothing that I would change. Like, and the problem children that I call them, that I can't get a certain thing right and it's really bothering me and I've tried it every which way but, sideways. And I sit with them sometimes and just have them in the areas that I most frequent in the house so that I can see it and see it and see it. And then every once in a while, I'll be like, oh shit. And it'll come to me out of nowhere. And I'd be like, I should have done that. And then I change it and then I'm happy. And then I'll be able to put it up for sale. But um, yeah, it's interesting because I really want to sit with it for a couple of weeks to make sure I still like it. But now I'm having this, existential crisis of
Uh-oh.
of
That's a heavy word. It involves a
yeah
lot.
of of you know I'm just done with corporate America. I'm going all in on myself, similar to you, but I'm trying to figure out what my new voice is, what my new true voice is, and I'm doing that experiment to try to figure that out. And I have a what I call a box of toys of stuff from the kitchen, office equipment, like dog toys, whatever it is, and I roll them on the canvas to get them marks that are not planned. So the magic to me is the things that I don't plan that happen. Like I have an idea of where I'm going, as far as perspective and, concept and, somewhat colors. But usually when I start out on that path, it'll go a different way that I never saw coming because then I see something happening and I'm like, oh, let's go there.
That is 100%. God, I hate that, by the way. I hate 100%. I think they make fun of it a lot in films where the guy is a douchebag or something and they're like, 100%, I'm with you 100%. So I'll say 1,000%, but it's one of those things where the more open-minded you can remain, and this is, and I'm going to give you a slew of buzzwords that they love to drop in white collar environments, pivoting and being and showing excessive resilience. But if you approach your own artistry with a rigid approach or mindset, it's going to limit you. And so
Mm,
I found that, and this it's all going to come together, I swear. But so I had been on this long hiatus of writer's block, and then I started attending open mics in Raleigh, and I had to start writing again because I'm like I can produce this, or I can present this old material, or I can challenge myself and write something anew. So I had
mhm,
a Halloween poem that was relatively short, and I was satisfied with it. But then I revisited it and I thought, I don't like it. It doesn't end strong enough. I want more. I want more
mm,
pizzazz in the
mm,
conclusion.
mhm,
And somehow it dawned on me, I'm sure similarly to how it dawns on you, what if I take this Halloween poem and it segues into John Carpenter's Halloween, where I'm now writing about Michael Myers.
mm.
And I know it sounds kind of wacky, but it somehow worked perfectly. And so now it was a poem that was just kind of vague and it was ominous, but now it starts off vague and ominous where I'm laying the groundwork, but then it kind of slithers around into this, well, now you're knocking on the wrong door at 45 Lambkin Lane. Now you
Yeah.
meet Michael Myers in the flesh, and now you're so emotionally and psychologically traumatized, things will never be the same. So I went from this kind of vague overview shot to something very personal, and
Mm,
it's been very well received. And I never anticipated writing a poem about like John Carpenter's Halloween film. So
yeah.
what started as my own work kind of morphed into an ekphrastic poem about art, which is a film. So
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't know.
That's
Sometimes those
great.
things can happen, and you really have to listen to them. And I think the only way you will develop that opportunity is if you sit in silence and you actually reflect and
Ooh,
contemplate.
oh
Which
my
is,
gosh.
I
You're
know,
teeing up my next question.
perfect. Go
I'm
by all
gonna
means.
I listened to one of your casts. I don't know which one it was,
Oh God, so many to
um,
pick from.
but something stuck out to me, very profound. You suggested to take time to yourself, to know thyself, so you can speak or reflect on what you're doing. And I agree 1,000%. But can you briefly talk about why, like, truly reflect on topics which will reflect in your writing, or do you think just as a person, we need to do that? And I have my own thoughts, but I don't want to prompt you. Yeah.
So first of all, I appreciate that you like to ask the questions without the pretext or the initial, you know,
Give my stance on it.
appetizer discussion. I think it does
Yeah.
make for it's like so Al Swearingen, this character in Deadwood said, opinion solicited is not the same as opinion freely voiced. And so I think there's a lot to that.
Yeah.
But that's just I think it's just good life advice to be healthy minded in general. Absent any artistic proclivities, I think we should all, and I think I'm really good at identifying what people are not doing right, at least by my own purview, and then basing how they're not comporting themselves correctly. I try to apply that to myself, and that, well, they're doing something I don't like, so I'm going to make sure that I'm not doing that. I guess the best example would be you're raised by your parents, but the sooner you can recognize your parents' strengths and weaknesses, if you so choose to be a parent, you'll know how you don't want to parent,
Yeah.
because you learn from their shortcomings or what have you.
Mhm.
So, I think that if you spend time with yourself, you can kind of become your own best friend. You can start trusting judgment and you can feel more comfortable in your skin. And I know that it's probably a trite and cliched expression, like feel comfortable in your own skin. But when I'm around someone, I can pretty quickly detect when they don't feel comfortable in their own skin, or when
Mm,
they have what I call like chameleonic properties, where they
mm,
be who they need to be, or who they are convinced they need to be to go along, to get along, to be accepted. But I have always vehemently rejected the idea of artifice or of pretending to be something that you're not, because while it may allow you entrance into some executive boardrooms, or it may allow you to get into the swankiest clubs, you still have to go home by yourself at the end of the day. And if you know you're living a lie, and if you live a lie all the time, then who are you? And if you don't know
yeah,
the answer to that question, I think on some level, whether it's overt or more subconscious, you're going to feel unsettled and you're going to feel listless. So
yeah,
I think the more time you spend getting to know who you are, not only are you going to feel more comfortable and you'll feel more confident, but so I started observing a lot of people, especially, so I am technically a millennial,
mm,
but that's through no fault of my own. I mean, you're born when you're born, right? But
mm.
I reject the millennial dogma. I think I'm kind of well, I've always been a rebel anyway. I normally have a mohawk, by the way. That's why, in part, it's chemo hawk sessions. But I shave my head to because I had to go to the dermatologist and I wanted them to examine a mole on my head. That's neither here nor there. So medical reasons I shave the mohawk, but it will grow back. But I've always been somewhat rebellious, and so for me, when I see these millennials today, or those that came after, I guess Gen X or Gen
Yeah,
Z, the
Gen
Gen
Z.
Zers,
Yeah. Hmm.
um, they stay so busy with loudness and busyness, and they're hopping from one event to another. They're coming from one social gathering,
Yeah.
they're drifting off to another soiree. There's no downtime, and in America, we're a country that's you are what you're doing. And so I remember talking to Red Devil, my wife, she had visited Europe, and she noticed something by like day two of her visit, that in Europe, this was Ireland, Scotland, she noticed that the question that you're asked there is, what do you like to do? What is your
Mm,
passion? What is your hobby? What are your
mm,
interests? Here
mm.
in America, first question out of anyone's mouth, what do you do for a living? How do you earn your living? Where do you work? Who do you work for? And I
Mm.
think that's so ingrained in our being that if you're not producing something, or if you're not involved at a rally or a social function, then you're worthless. And I think that's a very damaging approach. I think that when we spend time in solitude, all the great thinkers, all the great philosophers, they came to these grand epiphanies because they spent time alone, thinking through their thoughts, and probably being critical of themselves, but
Yeah.
only in the context of their own observations, which are probably more accurate.
Yeah.
So I just think there's a lot to be said about and the Greeks said it best. It's the I don't know what episode you listened to, but I did a short on know thyself, and
I love it. I watch it all the time. Yeah.
it's the first like inscripted thing at the Tower of Delphi in Greece. It's know thyself and you shall know the universe and the gods. And I don't know exactly what that means, but the assumption would be if you spend time knowing yourself, things might be revealed to you that
That's
you might
right.
not otherwise ever become
Yes.
knowledgeable.
Yeah. And, I sound like an old person when I say these things, but
I'm an old soul. I
I'm
can
not
relate.
crotchety yet, but I really feel like the dopamine hit they get from social media and just the constant instant gratification,
Right.
is what you're talking about in essence. And, they have to have that constant, stuff happening in order to feel like they're a part of the community and a part of their generation and a part of their friend group or a part of their family. And I think it is a lost art to reflect and be by yourself. And I have gotten it a lot because I've divorced a long time ago, and people are like, why aren't you dating? And I'm like, because I don't want to. Like, I don't want to. I'm too into what I'm trying to do for myself right now, and what I'm trying to do for my passion, and trying to help bring something into this world that's beautiful or touching or moving to people. And I just, and this is my personal thought, don't come after me. Um, I I I for me, men bring chaos and just messiness into life for me. That's been my experience thus far. I would love to not have that experience, but that's what's happened. And every time I think, wow, I'm so much peaceful, more happy, more reflective. I have things that come to me because I have that time, and I just don't want to go back. So it might be a permanent thing for me, who knows? But that's where I'm at right now. But reflection is really in that quiet time, that time to myself, to know myself. It's just so important. Yeah.
I I think people should be as honest as possible, and a lot of people, and that's the other thing is we live currently in a world where people just won't say things that might be true at the fear of offense
Mm,
giving. And I think like when you see things like comedians being canceled, it's a very scary premise because there's a lot of truth in comedy even, and
mm,
that's why we keep finding our way back to comedians and comedy because there's more than a sliver of truth in it. But I believe that if you want to give your artistic pursuits the most that you can, if you're in a relationship, it's hard. It's hard because you want to be good in a relationship. You want to be very giving and you want to be, thoughtful with your time and you want to make sure that you're present in the relationships. So, I remember when I was young, there was like a certain, like a template that you had to follow to live in America. You have to start dating, then you have to get married. Then it's all about how many kids are
yeah.
you going to have. You have that first kid. It's like, oh, you know what that kid really needs? A
Yeah.
sibling. And
Yeah.
now you have 5 kids. You're in a marriage maybe you don't even want to be in, and now you're going to the people that maybe you grew up in a small town, or maybe you grew up in Georgia, for example. There's a lot of societal expectation in Georgia, and you did all these huge life decisions for the sake of others or what they
Yeah.
might think of you. And
Yes.
and, and I was never and I was reluctant to get married. I was reluctant to be in a serious relationship. I never wanted kids personally because I think for me, I just didn't want to do something because I felt pressure to do so because that's just what people do. And
Mm,
it speaks to my rebellious personality, but I think it
mm,
would be very hard to engage to the way that you need to intellectually and emotionally to craft what you're trying to craft if you also had to be present, for a spouse or for a family. Like, and I've also known people that they were very artistic in college and they got like advanced degrees in writing or some form of art, and then they had families, and all
hmm.
that just kind of went out the window for 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's fine. I mean, you obviously prioritized the way that you intended to, but the art gets sometimes the short end of the stick on those
Yeah.
transactions. So I
Yeah,
think
for
I think it's
sure.
really
And
good.
yeah, and I'm like you, been very rebellious with how I run my life, and people have all kinds of opinions about what I'm doing or not doing, and I just don't care anymore. I think that's what getting older, gives you is I just don't give a shit. I'm like, I'm doing what makes me happy. If I come to a relationship that's, makes me happy and it will weave in to accept that I have this, passion that I'm trying to push forward, great. If it works and it melds together. I'd love to have kids in my life. I can do that in other ways. I can volunteer, stuff like that.
Right,
So
right.
it doesn't have to be that I'm the provider and the caregiver, but and I have lots of family members who have children, so and friends. So it's fun to come in and be that fun, happy person that wants to play with them so much because you don't get to. And then the parents like it because they're like,
They
yeah,
get a
sure,
break.
go have them, But yeah, just pivoting on what we're talking about here. Another really important thread, and I'm going way over my time, so please cut me off if you need to.
I don't. I am
Um,
here to help serve artists and antics with April.
yes. So, and I appreciate that. I heard you talking about celebrating or honoring your own achievements, which a lot of people don't do as well. So I'd like
Right, you're
to
correct.
hear about that, briefly, and then I have some quick fire questions for you, and I'll let you go.
No, it's fine. So I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like forced modesty or if we've been because a term I never heard this two-word expression ever until about 5 years ago when it started wiggling its ugly fucking head into our discourse, and that is imposter syndrome. I
Mm,
mean, I just remember I would hear things like "fake it till you make it," but "fake it till you make it" has a positive connotation to it. It's like
yeah,
I'm going to fake it and then I will make it, and it doesn't matter how I got there.
yeah,
But with imposter syndrome, nobody likes to be called an imposter. It goes right back to the whole being artificial thing. But I think life is hard. Even if you're not looking for drama or complexity, it invariably finds you. And so I don't understand why we live in a world where even if you do something really great, or if you work hard on a project for a year, it's just over and now you're just on to the next project. And I don't know if that's some sort of indoctrination or subliminal messaging, or if we just grew up thinking that we weren't good enough. I don't know what it
mm.
is, but
Yeah,
if
we
you,
talk about it a lot on here with a lot of the creatives. They
right,
all talk about it because they all feel like, well, what do I have to say? And what, you know, is what I'm saying enough, you know?
Right. And I
Yeah.
think that it shouldn't come easy and you should work hard on it. But to put it in perspective, so I had a cancerous experience in 2017 and I was in the hospital for 43 days and I
Wow.
almost died.
I'm so
And
sorry.
that's no, it's fine. The good news is I can tell you about it. The bad news would
Yeah.
have been if I hadn't ever
Yeah,
exited
we never met.
ICU. But that's part and parcel why I have a mohawk is because when I started getting chemo, it was a very aggressive chemo, and I was told that I was going to lose all my hair and my eyebrows and all that. So I was like, all right, well, fuck it, I'll just get a mohawk. What's the worst that can happen? But then I never
Hmm.
lost my hair. So I'm asking the infusion nurses, I was like, why haven't I lost my hair? And they're like, we don't know. I mean, everyone that's come in here that's had that same regiment, we can't get into their names because of HIPAA, blah, blah, blah. But no
Yeah.
one has not lost their hair. And I'm thinking, so that's my superpower. I can't
Right.
lose my hair. This is perfect. So I had a
Yeah.
mohawk ever since. I've had a mohawk now for like 8 years or whatever. And so for me, I talk about the cancer experience. I talk about how much it sucked. I talk about how you learn things about who your true friends are and who your friends aren't. And I
Mm.
like to celebrate the fact that I'm alive and that I didn't get a tracheotomy. If I had been in the ICU for one more day, they would have given me a tracheotomy, which I would not have enjoyed. And so I like to celebrate the fact that aside from some scars, and I may never be able to run or sprint again, I came out of it okay. And so that's a celebratory situation. I think people's birthdays should be celebrated. I hate when people are like, "Oh, it's my birthday, but it's just another day." I'm like, "No, so, fuck, it's a day that you entered this world and you matter." And I think people should either celebrate their own birthday or people should celebrate their birthday for them.
Mm.
But when you create a painting, and I'm sure you could probably craft a top five list of your paintings if you had
Mm.
to, or you might
Yeah.
already know. Okay, what's one of your favorite paintings? What is it called?
The Blues Man. It's called the Blues Man, and it's and it looks like an old smoky room, and it's this old black man playing guitar with a cigarette in his mouth, and the smoke is coming up. And he doesn't smoke, and nor was he by a pole, which I put a wooden pole next to him. But yeah, it just it's those moments where you see somebody that's really into what they're doing, and you know they were meant to do that and you're getting to watch it and experience it. And that's the moment I was trying to capture. Yeah. Mhm.
So you should look at that work, and there are a handful of poems that I have composed that I am just very proud of. And I like to try to have people read them. I like to read them at open mics. I like to talk about the poem and why I like it. I like to celebrate the fact that I'm very proud of and you're not cocky or arrogant because you're proud of something that you worked hard on.
Mm,
I think it's better to be proud on it and sing your own praises a little bit than to just live under the thumb of I'm never good enough and I'm not going to take even a moment to celebrate this thing that I spent, maybe a third of your life on. I think
yeah.
that's not how it should be. That feels wrong. It feels warped. And even Erin, I remember, I think I was put on this earth to keep people honest. I think that's my mission in life. And I mean that in the good ways, not in like the snarky,
Right.
I'm
Correcting
like,
you. Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. But it's like somebody will tell me something and I'll be like, that doesn't sound as healthy as it could be. So she created her chapbook, she finished it, and she was proud of it, but then immediately started talking about, well, what's chapter two going to be? Like, what's the next chapbook going to be? And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, you've been working on this thing for a long time. I'm like,
Right.
just sit with it for like a month and just
A minute.
revel because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to do that, or else what are we doing here? And
Yeah.
so I wrote this poem called Time Steals All Wounds. And I just am very proud of how I put it together, and it achieved what I sought out to, accomplish. And that's a poem that I read periodically, like every couple of weeks. I'll just revisit the poem just for myself. And I'm
Mm.
like, I'm so glad I was able to string those words together in that way. I may never be able to do that again. And so, yes, I think we should be taking time to celebrate because there's no shortage of time where people are being shitty to themselves, to other people, to
Oh
the
yeah.
world, to society at large.
We beat ourselves up pretty good. I know I do,
Yes,
or
yes.
have in the past. I'm trying to break that programming, but yes. Yeah, for sure.
So I did want to ask you with artist antics with April,
Mhm.
has this, and you've been doing it for what, maybe
A
like
year. A
a
year.
year? Okay.
Mhm.
And yeah, I know you've spoken successfully with a large variety of artists,
Yep.
which I was very it's very commendable how you've had such a variety. Like you've had a true variety. Just looking at the titles of your episodes,
Yep. Yep.
you've covered a large span of
Yeah, and that
art,
happened naturally. I didn't even plan that. Yeah.
and that often can be the best.
Yeah.
But has it helped you? Has it
Oh,
helped you in an observable, definitive
oh,
way with your own?
Yes, so many things, so many tips, so many I mean, like tangible tricks and tips, and then, the ones that make you think, "Oh, I'm not thinking of that right," and stuff like that. This is my vision. I'm trying to build this community so we can all communicate somewhere. I'm not sure where it might be. I think I'm gonna create a WhatsApp app group so we can all talk to each other and get, guidance from each other. That's my end goal, but I'm thinking, I'm going to gather all these tips that I get from everybody because there's pearls in every conversation. And I think I'm going to put it into a book someday for creatives. But that's, further down, maybe another year or so. But because right now I'm really working on my new style, my art business, but that's the end game. Yeah. And it's just so lovely. Everybody's been so amazing. And I've actually had different sets of people already helping each other. So somebody will see another person I've talked to and say, "Hey, I really want to talk to them. Can you connect me?" And then they'll do something together, and just does my heart good because that's why I did all this. So
I mean, that is about as satisfying a feeling.
yeah, it made me cry. It made me cry.
Because you created it from nothing
Yep.
and you didn't know, I mean, you knew what you wanted to do in broad strokes, but all the minutia you hadn't quite calculated yet. But because I discovered you because Erin had told me she had been a guest on
Yep.
Antics with April, and all I knew,
Yep.
and you're local, right? You live in
Yep.
the okay,
Yes. I'm in Durham.
and I was looking at some of your art after you finished your page, and you had this long bio statement, which was really cool too. And I love a Cuban sandwich, by the way. It's one of my top three favorite sandwiches of all time. A Cuban sandwich, and then a banh mi, a Vietnamese
Yes.
char grilled pork sandwich, and maybe a
Agreed.
meatball sub. But that's just so cool because I've been trying to achieve something similarly, attending the open mics and trying to network. And I'm not. It's weird because I saw in this Stephen King story called The Outsider where the guy has two tattoos. On four knuckles, he has the letters MUST, must. And then on the other four knuckles, he has CANT, can't. So can't, but must. So he's constantly at odds with himself. And that's me because I hate social media. I don't have any social media accounts. I just have the podcast.
Yeah.
So me showing up visually was like a big deal for me because
Aw.
I don't like what social media has done to just the heartbeat of our existences where we have to be
Yeah.
plugged in all the time and all these other things. But I really recognize and relate to what you're trying to achieve, which is to just recognize that art matters, get into the specifics of why it matters,
Yep.
and to learn
Show
things
people.
about yourself through the conversation.
That's right. And it also, one other point there is that I want to show people it's not so scary or hard to transition from, corporate job to being, a full time creative. You just have to have a plan and you have to go after it. And, we've talked about that a lot with many of the guests. Like, how did you transition? What did that look like? How did you do it? What did it feel like? All the things. And that's what I really want to get across is, to your earlier point, like everybody's so busy with the grind because they have 5 kids and they have to have a, certain level of income to support their family. But then their creative side gets left to the wayside. And, that's a big part of their heart that's just being left there, not, being fulfilled. And I really just want to show them how they can, even if they don't go full time, they can weave in having parts of their life where they're, getting some satisfaction about their passion. So that's really important. Yeah. But thank you for noticing. I appreciate it.
No, and I wanted to ask you mentioned off mic you said that you and by the way, you are welcome. You are officially welcome on Chemo Hawk sessions
Oh, great.
anytime.
I'd love to.
And it would be very simple for you because all you have to do is show up. I
Yeah.
don't do any video, and I edit everything and then I post
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you about how you were able to find a way to start distancing yourself from the very suffocating premise of perfectionism. How did you
Oh,
start letting go?
yeah. Well, it's still a struggle
Sure,
inside of
sure.
me.
Lifelong struggle, no doubt. Because it's so innate into our, our
and
DNA.
and I'm probably more extreme, as my friends and family could tell you. I have very organized drawers. I'm a very organized person, and that's not the case with a lot of people, and usually not the case with artists. So, um, I've been learning to let go of, the way I want, an event to be done, or the way I want a painting to be finished, or a way that I want a blog to be, felt. I'm learning to listen to others' opinions, but like you were saying before, I'm strong enough in my own that I can take it in without feeling like I need to make a change. And I think that's the important part is like I'm taking in other people's opinions when I, either solicited or unsolicited, but I can't run my own way with that. I just have to sit on it and think, oh, well, that's something to think about, maybe, and go from there. But yeah, I'm trying to throw all of the corporate, perfect, everything has to be exact and correct and right, which we're all human and we make mistakes anyway. I'm trying to throw that thinking out the window. And I've been doing it for so many years. It's just so hard to get the needle out of the groove of that record, and I keep popping off of it. But every once in a while I find myself going back, but I'm getting there. I'm not where I used to be. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm getting there. Yeah.
So is this space behind you? Is this your studio?
No, this is the manifestation of what I would like my studio to be.
Are you serious?
Where
I've been operating under the assumption that all of those framed
oh
pieces
no,
were framed by you and they're very mathematical.
no.
These are
But
actually movie posters that I hung up myself through trial and error and made them somewhat straight. But
yeah,
if that was your studio, I would say that is a lovely,
yes.
very
If I
conducive
had one,
to.
this is what I would like it to look
Oh
like.
man,
But I
oh
have
man.
one in my house. It's just it's so cramped. It just doesn't make sense to have it as a background. Like
No,
I
I'm
have
with
the
you.
bonus room and then I have my desk for my office work and then the second part of the room is my studio. But I mean it's fine. It's more space than most people have, but I would really love to have a space like this in the
Because
future.
that looks like a building that could be in the tobacco district of
Yes,
Durham.
exactly,
That's what I was
exactly.
thinking.
Yep, that's exactly what I would like, a brick building to live out, the movie Ghost and have a loft and all the wood floors and brick you could, take, and then have all my art in there would be just heaven,
Oh
but
man, Patrick Swayze, R.I.P. I was a
yeah,
big fan of that man, and so was my
yeah,
mom. Because my mom, her dad died of pancreatic cancer at 49, and she was in love with Patrick Swayze, obviously, because he was a Texan and all this. And then he died of pancreatic
mm,
cancer, I think in his 50s. So my mom was like doubly devastated. But I will always think fondly of Patrick Swayze and Ghost
yeah,
and Dirty Dancing.
yeah.
But Point Break as Bodie, he
Yes,
was the
that's
man.
probably my favorite role of his,
Oh
him and
man.
Kiana, they were amazing. So I have my last quick fire questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready. As ready as I'm going to be.
Pen and paper or keyboard and screen?
Pen and paper, but I need
Okay.
to actually put my money where my mouth is and do more pen and paper because screen is
Yeah.
very convenient. And I
Yeah.
like the instant saves, but pen and paper, I think gets more to the root of the richness of your art.
So writing better in the sunrise or midnight?
Midnight.
Me too.
I'm a
If your
nocturnal animal.
Yep, me too. If your poems could start a revolution, what would it be?
To tear down the facade of artificial chameleonic social personalities and for everyone to just be who they are.
Oh, that's a good one. So which poet, living or dead, would you most want to go to dinner with?
You know, I it's relatively tough, but I'm just gonna cop out and say so. Anna Wheeler Wilcox is
Mm,
the author of my favorite poem of all time, which is Solitude. You know, laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep
yeah.
alone.
Yep.
I find that poem to speak to me directly. I enjoyed it when I was about 9. I still enjoy it. I've read a little bit of her work beyond that, and it's fine. But I just would love to sit with her for 30 minutes to just grill her about that poem and how she was able to make it a three stanzas magnate of perfection. And I want to know why she felt so isolated and why she was able to capture it in such a poignant and just inimitable way. I love that poem, so I would like to know
Yeah.
more about the artist behind it.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today. This was a wonderful conversation. And for everybody listening to us, we're going to put all the links and, all the things down in the description so you can reach out to Falsetto if you need to.
Oh,
Thank you so
absolutely.
much.
Thank you for having me. It was a real
Yeah.
treat, and I hope that as you continue on with this visual audio artistic medium, that it allows you to keep the record in the groove for
Yes.
longer periods of time
Yeah.
unmolested.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
thank you so much, April.
Yeah. Thank you.
If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Feel free to nominate yourself or someone you know as our next guest.
Thank you for being a part of our creative community. Stay inspired and keep shining bright.